Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Bufnagle the podcast, where we explore entertaining and enlightening discussions of the adventure of life and all things good, from science and technology to history and philosophy to leadership and success. We hope to give you a better understanding of the world and skills for everyone to pursue their own adventure.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Bufnagle, the podcast, where we talk about all things good in the pursuit of the adventure of life. I am Rafe, and happy Tuesday to you. It's a good Tuesday for me because the Buff episode is dropping, and it's dropping out there for the benefit of the world's greatest listeners who have made us a global top 10% podcast. As usual, feel free to reach us at bufnagle@bufnagle.com. Remember to share the love, share the buff, give us a 5-star review, hit subscribe and like and all those things. Hey, I got to say, this stuff matters. They tell me it matters to the algorithm or something like that. So hit those buttons and, push us from the top 10 to the top 5. That'd be great. Tell a friend to listen and you will get a free episode, and somewhere in the links, you can find a place to buy me a coffee, and that would be wonderful. This week's episode is kind of an update from last week. So last week, if you remember, if you were there, you will remember that I was waiting, and is often the case. I was not waiting particularly well. Let's just say this: there were a number of things for which I was waiting, and it turns out they have come, which is a wonderful thing. Some of the things that I wait for are, like I said last week, are perpetual. Things like contentment and guidance, courage, humility, grace, clarity, and the strength to do what is right. These things are always, for me, works in progress. I have made some progress in those areas, but as usual, with lots of those things that are virtues and things to strive at, much work remains. I was also waiting for God to do his magic trick and bring something good out of something bad. Now, he tends to do that on a grand episode very often, but sometimes it's difficult to see that in your daily life. I had written the words that I wrote last week. I had written those in one afternoon prior to recording. And while I was writing them and living out that day, I had spent some hours in, I would call them torment and consternation, although it's probably was not that desperate. I was waiting and hoping for the good, for the good thing to come out of the bad, and I was having difficulty contemplating how that could be. Later in the day, I needed to get the recording done so you guys could, get the buff-nagly goodness that you deserve. So I went ahead and I did the show. I did the show that you heard last week. I recorded that a couple days before it was supposed to drop. And I was curious if I should include those personal notes at the end of the show, but seeing as they were true and they seemed relevant to the topic, I kept them in. So I got around to doing the recording later that day. It was in the evening, and there were a number of things that were still unresolved, and my mind and my heart were distracted by these situations at hand. And I recorded the words about seeking something good from something bad. I kept those in. I got to the end. If those of you who listened to the end, you heard the end. I got to the end. I did the sign off, and I hit the little button that says stop or end recording, whatever it is, on my computer, which stops the recording and saves the content so it can be edited and done all those things with. And I hit the button to end the recording, and as I did, my phone lit up. Now, it didn't light up and explode or anything like that, but it lit up as a message from a very dear friend of mine had come through. It appeared just at that moment, and it was an unexpected update on the bad things that I was waiting to turn good, or hoping it would turn good. And the message was that all was well. In fact, really, that was it. It was like, things are well. Don't worry. And then the evidence that things were well, and the bad had vanished, and good had appeared. To me, it was stunningly miraculous, might be a way to put it. But the in an instant, the clouds that had covered my mood and my afternoon had parted, and everything was well. It was a stunning transformation, a really a wow, go figure kind of moment. And that was, right when I finished up, right when I got done doing the things that I needed to do, that talked about the things that were going on. As soon as I put that into the content, things turned out well. And I hey, that's all right. That's a good thing. So, you may recall also, I noted at the end of last week's show that we were all awaiting the arrival of another granddaughter, which is always a treasured thing around here. Things looked to be ahead of schedule early in the process. When you get closer, you start thinking, are we going to be on time? Are we going to hit this magic due date? Are we going to be late or early? What's going to happen with the schedule here? And things looked ahead of schedule, but then things slowed down and time passed, and the due date came and went, and no baby had showed up. So, no baby yet. And at this point, people get anxious about this sort of thing. Finally, some minor contractions showed up, and the parents went to the hospital in the wee hours of one of the mornings last week. And then six hours later, bingo, brand new baby girl, grand and glorious, a perfect little bundle of love waiting to share. Grandma and I were able to meet this new little girl and our daughter and her husband later that afternoon, and all was well there as well. Everybody was very grateful. It was expected that things would go well, and they did. And there was stories about how things went, and things actually ended. Once things got kicked off, they went faster than people had imagined. And now here we are post waiting, and there's a little baby that doesn't like to wait when she's hungry and all those things. But it was a grand experience. And when we were at the hospital, our daughter and her husband explained the naming process, how much time they had spent and how much attention they had given during the pregnancy to what they call discover the baby's name. This is, they don't look at this as a whimsical exercise to pick something clever or trendy or original or what have you. They explained what they had come to learn and to know during the pregnancy and how they found out her name. They consider their task to be one of search and find rather than just arbitrarily assign it. And so they talked about the name and how they found it. And they also informed us that her middle name aligns with my wife's late mother. So that was a very touching thing. And we were all very pleased. It's nice to know the name. And then immediately when they're named, you're like, okay, there's the name. And, you think about how that's going to go, and you try to imagine a little kid with that name or a grown up with that name. And you try to see how that's going to work out. And it's a fun thing to see the new name on the kids. And it was fun to hear the stories and how they got to where they are. Now, 2 days later, we were able to visit them at their house. That first visit was at the hospital. We were able to go to their house after they had been discharged from the hospital for both mother and daughter. And we were sitting around doing what you do at that point, right? We were chatting and holding new baby, and people were telling stories about previous births and who looked like whom and who had, grandma's ears or grandpa's hair or whatever it was. And we were doing all those things. And we mentioned that we thought it was very nice that the new baby girl's name was her great grandmother's name. And during our discussion, a cardinal came to the big window in the room where we were sitting. And it came to the window and fluttered around, looked for the new baby, and then flittered away as birds will do. And cardinals are seen in many cultures, and certainly I think at least moderately often in ours, as often as symbols of deceased loved ones showing up to bring sometimes messages of comfort or reassurance or hope to those who are grieving, or sometimes they are there just to check in, so to speak, maybe bring a message of peace and continued love. And I saw the cardinal, and I thought of that immediately. And I don't, I have no idea whether that's a true thing or not a true thing. It wouldn't surprise me if it is true, and it wouldn't surprise me if it isn't. But I worry that we can get a little stale if we always look for the material cause. When life is certainly more interesting, it's more engaging, it's more fun when we are open to the possibility of some other kind of cause. It seems to me the whole world is essentially a miracle. Why should it be a problem to hope for a continuation to those things that are real but actually immaterial? So today I asked Grandma, I said about, I mentioned that when we were there, we saw the cardinal, and she admitted that she had seen the cardinal as well. And she had thought what I had thought, and we both concluded that that was a good thing. So be on the lookout for the cardinals. I've seen them on several occasions in that context. And, you do what you want to do with the cardinals. I will believe what I want to believe, and I think all should be well in that regard. And just one other thing that's kind of fun here before we go, something I learned last week, a new thing, I guess. It was something that I didn't know that I didn't know, but once I learned it, it became relatively obvious, as those things do. And I figured I probably should have been taught it explicitly, but I was taught everything I needed to know to learn it myself. So I'll share it with you, and you may find it interesting, or you may hopefully, okay, this is one of those things that if you're driving, you're going to need to fog up the window so you can do the math with me on the window where you're driving. I was looking at some square tiles, like on the floor. I think they were on the floor of the gas station where I was at the time, and I thought about inscribing a circle inside one of the squares. So I think mathematicians do this sort of thing relatively often, but I imagine putting a circle inside of a square. So what you do is you put the center of the circle right at the center of the square, and you draw a circle inside there, and it will touch all four of the walls, so to speak, all four of the edges, right at the edges, right? It was at the 12 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions if it were a clock. And so I was thinking about the area of such a circle and the area of such a square. So let's suppose, just for fun, and this makes the math, you can do it without doing this, but it's easier to do it this way. So let's suppose that the square in question that you're looking at has an edge length of 2 units. Now, it doesn't really matter what units you use. You can pick warm, human-scaled imperial units like inches or feet or some such thing, or you can pick cold, bureaucratic, mechanical units like meters or centimeters, whatever you like to do. Pick your favorite unit and assign it there. If the square has edge length of 2, then the square's area is going to be 4, right? Because 2 times 2 is 4. So the area of the square is 4 square units because the edge length is 2. Now, if you inscribe the circle in there, like I asked you to do, then the inscribed circle has a smaller area. And we can figure out what that area is because we know some of these formulas from a couple of shows back. The area is pi times r, pi r squared. If you want to use tau, you can do that. It's 1/2 tau r squared. And the radius is 1 unit. So it's going to be pi times 1 times 1. So the area is just pi units. Okay, so it's pi square units. It's a little bit more than 3, and the area of the square is 4. So the circle that fits inside the square takes up about just about 3/4 of the area of the square. Okay, so we got 3.14, and we have 4. And then I thought, well, what if we took a circle and put it not inside the square, but if we put it around the square? What if we circumscribe the circle around the square so that it only touches the square at the corners? Okay. What is the area of this circle? Well, it turns out it's not particularly hard to do. The radius goes from the center of the square, the same place we were before, and it goes out to the corner. Well, any of the corners, because they're all the same. And that it turns out that distance is the square root of 2. If you go from the center of the square out to the corner, and the edge length is 2, then that length there is going to be square root of 2. You can use the Pythagorean theorem to figure that out. So that distance is going to be about 1.4 and change, or just call it square root of 2. Now the area of this big circle is going to be pi times r, again, pi r squared. And since r is the square root of 2, when you square the r, you're going to get root 2 squared, which is going to be 2. And you're going to multiply that by pi, and you're going to get 2 pi. So the area of the inner circle is pi, and the area of the outer circle is 2 pi, whatever the units you have. Okay, so the outer circle is actually twice the area of the inner circle that we just drew. Now, maybe we learned that in geometry. It seems to me that it's kind of nice that it's twice the size when you inscribe and circumscribe it around a square. But I think that's an interesting thing. If you put a pizza into a square box, right, then and then you take and you put the box inside a pizza. Okay, so you make a pizza big enough to hold the whole box. The pizza that holds the whole box is going to be twice the size of the pizza that's in the box. Okay, now maybe you knew that. I didn't know that, so I figured it out. We were given those tools, and that's why we figured those things out. And maybe you knew that. I didn't know that, or maybe I knew it and forgot. But if you think about areas often, then there's a thing you can do. Now, of course, I told my brother this. He's been on the show numerous times as the what do we call him? The world's favorite time traveling anesthesiologist and ham radio operator. That guy. And I told him that, and of course, he verified all the math for me, which is good because I was doing this thinking. I was thinking about this while I was filling my big gulp at the gas station, and then we both said essentially, what if you use a different shape other than a square? What if instead of a square you have a pentagon, right, or an octagon or something like that, and you do the same trick? You inscribe and then you circumscribe, and you look at the ratio of those two things. And in general, if you have an n-sided gon, a decagon, or a dodecahedron, well, whatever one is, a gon with 20 sides or 12 sides. If you give me n, I can give you a gon of that with that many sides. And the question is, what's the ratio of the circles then? Now, it seems that it should be pretty obvious, I think, that as the number of sides gets bigger, then those two circles get to be more and more similar. So that ratio should go to 1 as the number of sides go to infinity. So if you have a lot of sides on that gon, then that gon is going to look almost like a circle, and the inside circle and the outside circle are going to be almost identical, and that ratio will go to 1. And you can prove that if you can come up with a formula for that ratio. Well, it turns out that my brother worked this out, and then we verified his math, and the ratio for a given number of sides n can be shown to be 1 over the square of the cosine of pi over n. Now, if you don't like pi, that's pi radians, okay? So if you don't like to measure if you don't like working in radians, you can just say 1 over the square of the cosine of 180 degrees over n. Now, for a square, you get n is equal to 4, because you have 4 sides on a square, right? You get 1 over cosine squared of pi over 4, which is 1 over the square root of 2 squared, which is, well, just the square root of 2 squared, which is 2 for the ratio. For an octagon, it turns out you get about 1.17. For a 50-sided gon, you get approximately 1.004. Oh, and if you do it for an equilateral triangle, you get a ratio of 4. So you should not let them give you a whole pizza inside one of those little tiny triangle boxes. You should try to get a pizza outside of that box. So anyway, that's a thing you can do with those things. And you will get special buff points if you send us a proof of that formula for that ratio of those things. For those of you out there who like to do a lot of trig, I said 1 over cosine squared. That 1 over cosine squared is just secant squared. Secant, cosecant, and cotangent are kind of obscure trig functions. So we try to, we don't use them very often. So feel free to use 1 over cosine squared. Anyway, that's kind of a fun thing. Next time you're at the gas station, fill in your big gulp, look at the tiles, think about the squares, buy yourself some pizza, and enjoy the fact that you may see a cardinal on the way home. In summary, I think things have gone pretty well, and I'm very pleased to report that. And I feel it's part of the duty of this show to focus on those things that are good, the pursuit of the good. Things went well. My prayer was answered, very timely. My granddaughter arrived and was blessed, and was blessed by a sign from her late mother-in-law, from my late mother-in-law, her late, whatever that would be, great grandmother. And we all learned a cool thing about pizza and square boxes around circular pizzas. So it seems like a win of a week to me, and I hope your week went as well. In the meantime, seek the good, live virtuously, and flourish, and enjoy the adventure of life.
It's going to be a great day.